On the first day of waking up from the 3,000 trials, the Qing Yan, who had returned from the trial, was tricked by the missing emperor. On her wedding night, she stood up her pigeon, not to mention, and even left her to listen to politics from behind. To solve his internal turmoil, balance his power, and deal with the palace conspiracy for him, yet to have children for him. Think beautifully. Solved internal and external troubles, thinking that she could finally enjoy it with peace of mind, but found that more and more people approached her for various inexplicable reasons. Can ordinary people easily conquer this palace? Blocked the way these people came, snatched the system for their own people to use, no one refused, but they will never be attacked. Keywords of the novel. Forbidden strategies without pop-ups in this palace, forbidden strategies for downloading the complete collection of TXT in this palace, forbidden strategies for reading the latest chapters in this palace. Chapter 1. Emperor Missing 1. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 1 Emperor Missing 1 In early summer, the sky is slightly bright. The gentle yet urgent voice outside pulled Qing Yan out of the chaos. At first, when she opened her eyes, everything she could see was particularly unfamiliar, making her unable to help but suspect that she was forcibly crossing through. Struggling to suppress her spiritual consciousness, she flipped out of bed, dressed in gorgeous wedding attire and exhausted, but there were only traces of one person lying on the entire phoenix bed. Inside, there was no one else besides her, so the groom stood her up on wedding night. The memory in my brain slowly revived, only to realize that it had returned to my own body, which was very strange. I inexplicably left and then returned inexplicably. Even give her a feeling of being manipulated. If that's the case, then the person behind her has the ability to tear apart the void earth and earth, which is not something she can compete with today. But what makes her wonder is, why is it her? Just like flipping through a diary, sorting through the memories of her 3 years away, and finally drawing a conclusion. Is the outsider occupying her body a fool? It has been over 3 years since she left. Her departure was forced, and while she was sleeping soundly, her body was suddenly occupied by an inexplicable person. Even when she was conscious, she kept following around her body, watching the outsider pretend to be the original owner, but she didn't know that all the members of the Qing family were cultivated by her. A little habit could make them grasp the tale of exploring the truth. Even when she first appeared, those people knew that the owner had a problem. Originally, Qing Yan was worried that this outsider would ruin the foundation of her family. After observing for more than a month, she found that this was just a short-sighted and hedonistic person. Therefore, when she saw her confidant systematically excluding outsiders from the influence of the Qing family, she left with peace of mind. However, the outsider left Qingmong Mountain shortly after her departure and arrived at Yongqing, the capital of the Qing dynasty. What puzzled her was that this person seemed to know Yongqing very well. She was very certain that this person did not have her memory, but she was extremely familiar with everything from a certain store to a powerful imperial family, as if this was where she was born. Or is it that the people who occupied her body were originally from the Qing dynasty? I used to think that by mastering the management of the Qing family, she could peacefully hide behind the scenes. However, this bizarre experience hit her hard in the face. Qing Yan sighed, but a hint of interest couldn't help but rise in her heart. Compared to the ordinary life, it was this life filled with secrets that piqued her even more. Since she has returned, the secret setter should have thought that one day in the future, she will reveal all the truth. You have to take care of yourself, at least until the moment I discover you. She murmured softly, but her words were eerie and mysterious. After being taken away by that mysterious power, she thought she would die, but did not expect to reappear in another form. There, she gained strength, experienced hardships, and underwent the transformation of cramping and pulse cutting, making her life more difficult than death. It was not until later that she successfully stood at the top and accepted the admiration of everyone. This is only the past 3 years, but she has been in that mysterious trial place for 1,000 years, not old or dead, unaware of time. Especially at this time, she misses her original place even more, and even finds various ways to come back, but all in vain. Unexpectedly, in the same dream, she returned to her body. And in these 3 years, the deaths of outsiders not only stunned the entire Qing family, but also amazed the entire Qing dynasty. They played tricks on the children of aristocratic families, rode 3 to 4 to 5 boats, and eventually became empresses. Isn't this emperor fond of the green grassland? Fortunately, outsiders only have a lecherous heart but not a lecherous courage. They have been addicted to words and shameless love words, one after another, and their bodies are still the same as when they left. Just what's going on inside, you don't have to probe her to know. She's lazy and absurd, how can she maintain her peak? At this moment, Qing Yan felt a headache. If something else had gone wrong, it would have been fine. However, reputation was not something she particularly cared about, but for women, being pure and loving oneself is the most basic understanding. Nowadays, even if she becomes the empress, she may still have the worst reputation in the history of the Qing dynasty. The outsider was living recklessly, but she was given a big challenge. Yesterday's posthumous ceremony was very grand, and the dowry were arranged by Feng Bo. Even this posthumous position was a credit to the Qing family. Qing Yan herself did not expect that the emperor of the Qing dynasty was actually the shameless second patriarch she had saved a few years ago. She saved his life, but was entangled by him for more than 3 months. In the end, he was so annoyed that he couldn't bear it anymore. Seeing how well he was injured, he immediately kicked him out. Qing Yan even suspected that the emperor, despite enduring being cheated, wanted to marry her. Did he discover something? As she could see, last night's original wedding night was missing one person. Could it be that something happened to that person? Later on, he felt that it was not right. That person was the emperor of the Qing dynasty, who abandoned the empress on the day of their wedding. He could really do this. However, host, are you awake? Did you practice today? Did you feel your body lighter? Since she had memories, there has always been something called a system in her mind, which says she is called Lan Xiaopang and can be used for cultivation. But until she left, she didn't pay attention to this thing. Unexpectedly, outsiders took the initiative to sign a contract with Lan Xiaopang, following his guidance to guide the spirit into the body and embark on the path of spiritual cultivation. Unfortunately, after 3 years, he was only a small spiritual warrior. The main focus of Yulong continent is spiritual cultivation, but as time goes by, the spiritual power on the continent decreases. Initially, spiritual scholars on the continent were like ants, and even the number of spiritual masters, spiritual immortals, and spiritual saints was considerable. At its peak, there were also spiritual gods. And each realm is divided into 10 sub-realms. When she was young, she heard the old man at home mention it. Initially, every advancement was accompanied by a qualitative leap, whether it was in the physical or spiritual realm. Later on, the mainland did not know whether it was a natural regression due to a lack of spiritual power or something else. These promotions were simplified and even the rules were difficult to capture. Until now, even if one could cultivate spirits, without strong spiritual support, they were essentially weak chickens. In fact, the most common people in the Dragon Quest continent today are ordinary people who cannot practice. Even the outsider, this small second-level spirit warrior, can be attracted by the aristocratic family, otherwise where could her face be so crooked? Qing Yan didn't answer, and although Lan Xiaopang felt strange, he didn't think much. But soon, it realized that it was wrong. It has lost contact with its host. Until many years later, it seemed to be locked in a sealed space, able to feel the presence of its host, but could no longer converse with it, nor participate in her exciting and thrilling life. End of this chapter. Chapter 2. The Disappearance of the Emperor 2. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 2. The disappearance of the emperor too imprisoned Blue Xiaopang in the depths of spiritual consciousness, completely ignoring its clamor. This thing has been around for over a decade, but it has never been able to escape her sea of knowledge. Therefore, Qing Yan speculates that Lan Xiaopang is bound to her, and now it seems that it is still bound to her body, otherwise it would not have been activated by that outsider. Qing Yan has always been cautious, especially when facing unknown things, such as Lan Xiaopang, who is not a species in this world, and it is difficult to determine whether they are enemies or friends. Moreover, Qing Yan feels that this little thing doesn't look very smart. I still haven't noticed that she can hear it. I remember when it first appeared, she ignored it and Lan Xiaopang thought it was due to language barriers. She also specialized in collecting language records of this world, learning the language of the Dragon Continent. After discovering that she still couldn't hear it, she thought she still couldn't understand it. Little did she know that she was enlightened in May, able to read 1,000 words of literature at the age of 1, and began to handle the affairs of the Qing family at the age of 2. She's just on guard against it. If it weren't for a sudden problem and being taken away, this blue chubby girl would have been so lonely that she would have left this world. Before, she didn't know what the system was, but now that she has gone through that mysterious trial, she understands everything. There won't be pies falling from the sky. And it's the pie that was actively pasted, so we should be even more cautious. The system she knows of takes pleasure in teasing players, with various pitfalls between words. If she believes it, it's better to be bullied and have nothing, and in most cases, it's fatal. In the trial field, countless deaths are caused by the system every second, making her trust the system. It's better to make her believe that the sun is rising from the west. Lan Xiaopang's requirement for her is to cultivate immortality. Qing Yan doesn't know what kind of immortality she is cultivating, but judging from the operation of outsiders, it is probably consistent with cultivating spirits. Did the outsider not contribute anything? Qing Yan doesn't believe it. To achieve something, there must be equal effort. This is the first lesson that the old man taught her when she was enlightened, remember it in her heart. Pop. The sound of the red candle burning out sounded, and she remembered that she had married the emperor yesterday, and her perception of her body told her that she had been guarding an empty room alone last night. Did the empress wake up? Come in. The people outside heard the commotion inside, and the maid who had been waiting for a long time orderly walked in with her toiletries. What caught the eye were all strangers, and Qing Yan knew that her 4 maids had not been taken seriously. Strangely enough, the person who was grooming her was brought over by the prayer for rain hall, and outsiders happily accepted it. The conflict between the royal family and the prayer for rain palace has reached a white-hot point. The outsider is either ignorant or has a relationship with the prayer for rain palace when the people from the prayer for rain palace serve her personally. At this thought, it instantly felt reasonable. Here, those who use magic to expel the souls of others seem to be the only ones most suspected. After all, they are the most mysterious people on this continent, aren't they? If she still comes back, then the soul-swapping person behind her will surely notice that those demons and monsters that need to be killed will remain untouched in response to all changes. Qing Yan sat in front of the bronze mirror, dressed by the person behind her. Through the blurry mirror, she saw that her originally innocent face had disappeared, leaving only the shyness and beauty of a woman. However, in just 3 years, she had become somewhat unaware of her appearance. This is clearly her original appearance. With this appearance, outsiders have indeed attracted a lot of attention, but upon closer investigation, it is found that the so-called Qing family girl is just a fabrication. No one is truly so perfect and unreachable. The reputation of the Qing family was destroyed in an instant, and they became the ones who sought fame and reputation. If it weren't for the widespread presence of shops on the Dragon Island, they would have suffered heavy losses. Suddenly, a familiar sound came from outside the window. Sister, did the Empress wake up? It's the sound of falling dew. Chulu stood at the entrance of the palace, but without the orders of the empress, she was not allowed to serve in person. The outsider was extremely resistant to the people of the Qing family, and would rather use the prayer for rain hall than see them. Luoying cried countless times for this. They used to be the closest people to the master, but in the past 3 years, they could only watch from afar. Luoying is good at cooking, and the master loves to eat what she makes the most. Since the outsider occupied the master's body, she no longer eats what she makes. Therefore, the steward wanted to arrange for Luoying to go on a trip. But she refused. For the past 3 years, she had been hiding in the restaurant of the Qing family in Yongqing as a back chef. When she saw her master approaching from afar, she quickly hid and cried at night, covering her blanket. When housekeeper Fong was selecting people, 4 of their sisters signed up. Others might not have noticed, but she saw that housekeeper Fong didn't want them to be too close to the master. But it was their master. What if one day the master came back, but no one could use him, and he was in danger? So, only she came to the empress's Qinhe Hall, and Jingqiu and Liangxia went to different places, while Luoying stayed in Yongqing to deliver messages to them. Every day at Qingmong Mountain, she would go over to take a look at her master in the morning, hoping that the person she woke up with would become the one she knew. However, even after leaving the Qing family and entering this Qing Yongqing, it is still just that clumsy guy. She caused trouble and ruined the reputation and image of her master in the city of Yong. After setting a marriage date with His Majesty, she still went to meet her lover privately. If it weren't for occupying the master's body, they would have gone up and smoked her long ago. Unable to do anything, the butler Fong managed to keep her away from the power center of the Qing family and exiled her to Yongqing. At every moment, they are hoping for their master to come back. I don't know why, but when she woke up this morning, her heart began to beat violently. The last time she did this was on the day her owner disappeared. Without enough time to inform the other sisters, or even to tidy up, she rushed over. At this moment, a maid walked out of the dormitory. "Is this Sister Chulu?" "Empress Dowager, please come in." The person who came out was a close outsider named Yan Lu, with an extremely charming appearance. She spoke softly and had a pair of seductive eyes that even a woman couldn't help but be attracted to. Such a person, placed by the side of the newlywed empress, who believes that there is no other intention. If the master wakes up, the first thing to deal with is her. But at this moment, Chulu had no intention of thinking about the person's future. She whispered a soft thank you, then tidied up her hair and walked in straight. "I'll pay my respects to the empress by falling into the dew." Through the mirror, Qing Yan carefully scrutinized the falling dew kneeling on the ground. In 3 years, Chulu broke away from her childishness and followed the outsiders, helping her deal with the troubles she had caused, and surprisingly became much more calm. End of this chapter. Chapter 3. The Disappearance of the Emperor 3. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 3. The Disappearance of the Emperor 3. Perhaps as a precaution against the Qing family and Fong Bo, those close to her were placed on the outskirts after entering the palace. Even when she entered the capital before, she did not bring any Qing family members, but she knew that someone was in the dark. This outsider is really foolish and pitiful. He thought he could leave Qingmong Mountain and leave the range of the Qing family, but he didn't know that news about the Qing family spread throughout the mainland, and not a single member of the Qing family was weak. Not to mention others, just Chulu is a trusted confidant she has cultivated since childhood. She is the head of internal affairs and has exceptional talent in business. She has been with her since childhood, helping with the affairs of the Qing family. Even Fong Bo sometimes comes to her for advice. This time being arranged to enter the palace, it seems that it was not Fong Bo's idea. The person she trained, how could Fong Bo be willing to let her enter the palace and become a little palace maid? Moreover, the arrogance belonging to the Qing family also made her stand out among the palace maids. She was full of arrogance and could not be ignored. Without investigation, she knew that entering this harem had caused her a lot of injustice. She tapped her finger a few times on the table, then a few more times, and suddenly saw Zhuolu lift her head in surprise. "These years, you've worked hard." Tears instantly fell from the dewy eyes. "It's good when the master comes back, it's good when he comes back. I've been waiting for the master's return every day, and now I finally have it." Qing Yan stepped forward and helped her up, tidying up her messy hair strands. "Why are you crying? You should be happy. If you have any grievances, master, I will help you find a place. Nowadays, we are in short supply in this palace, and we need you to show off your abilities." Falling Dew looked at the green banquet with tears and laughter. "It's really nice. The master has just returned, and it should be the maids who came to pay their respects. However, Jingqiu and Liangxia are in other palaces, and I am the only one here." She picked up the comb on the dressing table and skillfully dressed her up. Soon, a completely different person appeared before her. Yan Lo brought breakfast to the table and saw the master and servant over there. His face immediately changed, and the plate in his hand fell to the ground with a bang. The soup spilled all over the ground, attracting the attention of the two members of the Qing Yan banquet. "Damn me! Damn me! Please forgive me, Empress." Qing Yan gave her a faint glance. "Get up." The accompanying person quickly cleaned up the messy ground. Yan Lo stood at the table, but dared not take a step forward. She knew that the true Empress had returned and was extremely anxious. Despite being the same person before going to bed last night, the news of everything going as usual had already been sent out this morning. Any excessive behavior would only arouse suspicion from others, especially after falling close to her. Before entering the palace, the master had told her about the identity of Chulu and that she could underestimate others, but this maid named Chulu was the one she should be most vigilant of. Starting from today, Chulu will be promoted to first-class palace maid and serve the palace closely. With just one sentence, Yan Lu was thrown into the dust, and she knew she was done. Ignoring Yan Li's ashen expression, Qing Yan sat at the table, slowly eating the breakfast in front of her. The food was sent from the imperial kitchen, and the taste could only be described as average, far inferior to what Luoying had made. After taking a few bites, she put it down. "Later, let Luoying enter the palace, and I will go find your majesty to arrange the small kitchen of Chenhe Palace for her to use." Chulu called out in a low voice, and after packing up for the Qing Yan, he spread the news. After she changed her phoenix robe, Liangxia and her companions stood outside the door. "I have seen my master." The two of them knelt down and kowtowed to Qing Yan in a proper manner. She quickly stepped forward and helped the two of them up. "Get up quickly." The two of them were not on duty at the Chinha Hall and received the news one step late. At this moment, when they saw the master, they were only filled with joy. The four of them were only missing the fallen petals, and it wasn't long before she would return to the master's side. The two of them, like Chulu, were promoted to first-class palace maids by Qing Yan, as if they were in the Qing family, serving her closely. However, Qing Yan, who had just returned, felt a bit uncomfortable. During the trial, she had to be always on guard against people around her shooting cold arrows, and also be wary of anyone who wanted to approach her. The three of them noticed her discomfort and were all cautious, with heartache in their eyes. Qing Yan also knew that it was too urgent and could only arrange the things in hand as soon as possible. Perhaps in a few days, he could return to the original time. Today is the second day of the wedding. According to the etiquette, the emperor should go to the previous court to hold a banquet to entertain civil and military officials and envoys, while she goes to the Empress Dowager's Sinaying Palace to pay her respects and also meet with the concubines of various palaces. The Empress Dowager went to the royal temple to pray for blessings for the late emperor and his majesty. The green banquet was saved, and all she needed to do was wait for the time to come and wait for the concubines to come. However, before she could arrange a spot, she heard someone from outside the palace spreading a message. "Report to Madam, Grandpa Yu has something to attend to." Yu Hai was the emperor's confidant. He grew up with the emperor and witnessed the dangers and difficulties of those years. The emperor married and came to power, becoming the first attendant in the imperial palace. As the tide rose, the ship rose high. Originally, he had to bow to everyone, but finally he could straighten his back. Today was supposed to be his busiest time, but he didn't expect her to come first to the Qinhe hall. Let him in. Outside, Grandpa Yu was already eagerly waiting, but upon hearing the summons, he suppressed his eagerness and slowly walked into the main hall. I have seen the Empress. For this Empress, Grandpa Yu was also the first to see her. In the matter of selecting the Empress, the Emperor was particularly decisive, abandoning the principle of selecting a noblewoman in the court for the later position and seeking out this completely untrue only daughter of the Qing family. Grandpa Yu felt extremely strange. There is a rumor in the martial arts world that there is a woman in the Qing family, who is like someone from outside the sky, holding the wealth of the world, mysterious and invisible, and extremely wise beyond reach. But in recent years, all kinds of suicidal behavior have truly stunned everyone. Her appearance is indeed like a fairy, but her wisdom is extremely ironic now. Unfortunately, this person has also become the lord of the central palace. Nowadays, the entire Qing dynasty is mocking the current emperor, and there is more doubt than affirmation of his political prowess. Thinking of this, Grandpa Yu felt heartbroken for his own majesty. After decades of hard work, he finally gained control of most of his power, but he never expected to be questioned because of the Empress. It is undeniable that this Empress Dowager is indeed like a fairy, and her cumbersome palace attire cannot suppress the luxury around her. Even if she stood with the Emperor in such a grand scene yesterday, she did not have any petty demeanor, but felt perfectly matched. Of course, as the first person around the Emperor, he immediately informed His Majesty of this and was rewarded with a piece of high-quality jade rui. Grandpa Yu, could you please wait outside early this morning? I wonder if the Emperor has any instructions from there. Yu Gonggong's heart trembled with the words, indicating that the Empress had some dissatisfaction in her heart. Empress. Kneel down neatly, mouth open and closed, but words are really difficult to say. Fortunately, Qing Yan noticed his predicament and gestured for the people around him to step down. The three of them were by her side, and the palace maids they served left in an orderly manner. Yesterday's wedding night, the fact that the Emperor did not stay in the Empress's palace was likely to be heard by the palace maids early on. The Emperor was not afraid of being implicated by historians, and as a victim, she was even more afraid of being ridiculed. If it weren't for this strange experience, she might still have some thoughts about her husband and son. Now, it's best to be safe with each other. If she provoked her, she would have lifted the entire imperial court. End of this chapter. Chapter 4. Urgent and Fierce. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 4. Urgent and fierce. If the Emperor found out that she had such thoughts, he would probably feel aggrieved for himself. After all, he had always been willing to marry her. Even if the Fangguan family told him all the facts, he did not regret it at all, and even faintly felt excited because he knew that if it were a real banquet, he would never enter this harem. Of course, Duke Yu knew why the Empress was dissatisfied. If there was any way, he would never come here at this moment to get moldy, but the Emperor was his master, and he couldn't shake off this pot no matter what. He also knew that His Majesty's handling of this matter was not proper, but at a critical moment, only the Empress could solve the predicament at this moment. Empress, yesterday Your Majesty was assassinated on the land of Leichen Hall, and now it's nowhere to be found. Please go forward and have a banquet. Without waiting for the Qing Yan to take any action, she saw Chula looking over. Yesterday Your Majesty went missing, and today my father-in-law came to report, but he didn't take my lord seriously, or did he say that this Qing celebration doesn't favor my Qing family? Now that my lord has just gotten married, should we clean up the mess left by Your Majesty? Now that we are just guests, is it possible that Your Majesty won't be able to find them in a day, so my lord will exercise imperial power in a day? After a questioning, Yu Gongong was speechless, but unfortunately, the empress sitting above seemed unheard of. Madam, you were already married to your majesty yesterday, and both were honored. Your majesty's personal rule is likely to be of great benefit to you. Now that your majesty is gone, those ministers who were originally opposed to personal rule will inevitably use this to blackmail your majesty into delegating power. At that time, not only your majesty, but also your destiny will be fully in the hands of the Empress Dowager. Bold. Grandpa Yu, you're just a servant, but you dare to criticize your master. Did you eat the bear's heart and leopard's skull? The sharp roar of the falling dew instantly brought Yu Hai back to his senses, and he was scared to the ground. Damn it, servant. Damn it, servant. As your majesty said, his heart has grown stronger with his majesty's personal rule during this period, and he even criticized the Empress Dowager in front of the Empress Dowager. If this were to spread, he might lose his life. Recalling his majesty's confession before his disappearance, he suddenly looked up again. You are from the Qing family. With your pride, are you willing to bow down to the Empress Dowager? I assure you that your majesty follows the etiquette system the most, and you are the most esteemed in the harem. Yesterday, before your majesty came down, you delivered the Phoenix bracelet and Phoenix seal, and you now have the right to control the Qing dynasty together with your majesty. Please consider the overall situation and go to court to listen. After Grandpa Yu finished speaking, he bent down and lay on the ground, saying that he would also let the Empress go today. In fact, he really doesn't understand. The Empress just entered the harem yesterday. How did your majesty consider making the Empress face that kind of cultivator directly? At this point, Qing Yan understood that she had been calculated by the person beside her. Leaving aside whether the disappearance was true or false, giving her the power was not something that a small servant dared to say. Duke Yu, you are very planning for the emperor. According to what you said, is it necessary to go to this palace today in the previous dynasty? What problems will arise then, and your lord will take responsibility for it? As someone who has been struggling in the palace and following his majesty to this day, Yu Hai instantly understood that the empress knew. He can only grit his head and claim it. Qing Yan sat up straight without hesitation, looking down at Grandpa Yu from a high position. Even a few meters apart, Grandpa Yu could still feel the piercing gaze on his back. At this moment, he dared not underestimate the Empress at all, and even vaguely felt the rumored wisdom on her body. Indeed, rumors were harmful, and his cold sweat slowly fell down his forehead. Where is your majesty? Grandpa Yu was so anxious that he almost burst into tears. In fact, since last night when the emperor went missing, he had been wanting to apologize with death. I don't know either. Your majesty only informed me before disappearing. If anything happens, I will seek the help of the empress. Ha! Indeed, it was calculated. Qing Yan was full of displeasure. Su Qi, that kid, his heart was like a sieve. How could he easily fall for someone else's way? Is this because I'm afraid the timing of her return may not be good, so I'm pulling her into the water in advance? If she comes back a few days early, who this empress is still uncertain. No matter how much dissatisfaction she had, it was someone she had been with for several months. She also knew that if it weren't for being desperate, Su Qi wouldn't have publicly resented her. After all, he wouldn't dare to openly accept this ungrateful title. Hiss. When Qing Yan's fingers touched the bracelet on her wrist, something pricked her. When she lifted her hand, she saw blood droplets oozing from her middle finger. Empress. Chulu hurriedly pressed the handkerchief onto her finger, and Grandpa Yu got up from the ground in a hurry, shouting and running out. Imperial physician. Imperial physician. Quickly pass on the imperial physician. Watching such a battle made Qing Yan stunned, and the heavens joined in the excitement. The sky, just as the scorching sun was rising, suddenly covered in dark clouds and began to rain. It was both urgent and fierce, drenching Yu Hai, who ran to the door. Come back. What a fuss. Yu Hai turned around and saw the people following Empress Dowager, all looking at him inexplicably, feeling embarrassed. Empress Dowager, on the other hand, was holding a handkerchief with a few bloodstains on it. He turned back with his head down and knelt down again. "All right, a little injury, it healed when you ran to the door. It's over, it's even more awkward. I am also worried about my mother. The master's health is precious, and any minor injuries should be taken seriously." Tired of leaving ink on such a versatile person, Qing Yan casually handed the handkerchief to Chulu and glanced casually at Yu Hai. "Tell me, what did your majesty say before his disappearance?" Yu Hai dared not ha-ha anymore and honestly explained everything. Yesterday, the emperor brought him to the Chinha Hall to visit the Empress Dowager. She was one of the people who came to attend the grand ceremony from the previous dynasty. However, she had just left. Along the way, the emperor followed the sea with a heavy heart, wanting to ask but not daring to ask. At that moment, the emperor spoke up. "If anything happens to me these days, all you need to do is go find the Empress Dowager. The Empress has full authority to handle all matters in the imperial court and harem. Remember, you must find the Empress." Upon hearing the words, Yu Hai was almost scared to death and hurriedly knelt down, speaking incessantly. "Your Majesty, you must take care of your health. If I leave you, I won't be able to live." This made the emperor just laugh in anger and stepped forward to kick him in the calf. "Hurry up and get up for me." "Like what? What can't survive? Are you planning to follow me to the same cave in life and death in the future? Don't do it, the position next to me will definitely be reserved for the Empress, no one can do it." Not to mention Yu Hai's expression at the time, Qing Yan was speechless upon hearing this. The three of them, including Zhuo Lu behind them, covered their mouths and chuckled lightly, making their words familiar to each other. End of this chapter. Chapter 5. The ultimate move has been used. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 5. The ultimate move has been used, so to what extent does your majesty want this palace to achieve? The green banquet interrupted Grandpa Yu's desire to speak, otherwise it would be uncertain where the topic would go off topic. "Your majesty wants you, Empress, to go to court and listen to politics," said Grandpa Yu timidly, with a childish expression on his face. "If it weren't for the silence in the room at this moment, I'm afraid I wouldn't have heard the last 4 words. Are you sure you didn't hear me wrong, Grandpa Yu?" Chulu's expression seemed to tear him apart. Grandpa Yu dared not move or answer. The gaze above had already tormented him countless times. "Your Majesty, why should we entrust such a difficult matter to him as a small servant?" But now his master has entrusted the matter to him. If it cannot be completed, he will not be the only one who has finished playing. "Empress, if your majesty has any other way, she will definitely not disturb your purity. Your majesty has just taken power, and if there is chaos in the domestic affairs now, I'm afraid the whole world will question your majesty. I think this kind of scene is also something you don't want to see. Now that the emperor and empress are united, we are both prosperous. Please feel aggrieved and share your worries and difficulties with your majesty." This statement is extremely beautiful. If the empress is not her master, she may have gone up long ago to help with her hard work, sleep and food. But there are some things that the master says and loses his value, so it's up to these servants to say. My father.in.law's words are not accurate. My master is the daughter of the Qing family. This small Qing harem cannot even compare to the backyard of our Qing family. It is already a marriage. Who can understand my master's grievances? However, Grandpa Yu directly focused his gaze on the seemingly leisurely Qing Yan, and did not evaluate the doubts and opposition of the falling dew. Madam, Empress Huaid once went to court to listen to politics. Who wouldn't praise her later generations? Empress Shang-Yi also had this experience. There is already a precedent for empresses to listen to politics in the history of the Qing dynasty. Otherwise, I would never have said such a heinous and immoral thing. Please think twice, madam. Qing Yan took a sip of morning dew and asked calmly. Empress why? The wife of Emperor Ming Zhao, who is said to have grown on a woman's belly. As for the wife, no one knows. Empress Wide is the target that Emperor Ming Zhao has set on the surface, but it falls short of its rightful name. Unfortunately, are you sure that using this as the positioning for the court's governance in this palace is not burying His Majesty the Emperor? Empress Shangyi, if it weren't for the injury and coma of Emperor Maching at that time, she wouldn't have been seen as a thorn in the eye by those aristocratic women just because she listened to a policy, and her beauty would have passed away early. I would like to ask a question. You said that husband and wife are one and prosperous together, which is indeed true. The lord of this palace, Your Majesty, is in charge of stabilizing Your Majesty's harem. Essentially, it can be considered as a contribution to stabilizing the rivers and mountains. But the harem cannot interfere with politics. If this palace goes to this court today, I don't know what problems will happen in the future. Will the father-in-law dare to take responsibility? If the harem chaos arises as a result, the direct victim of the discussion and criticism will be this palace. Who else can protect this palace? With a thud, Grandpa Yu's heart followed suit. What kind of guarantee can he give? He dare not give anything. Grandpa Yu only felt that life was difficult. On a great wedding day, the emperor is missing. There are too many people in the court who want to bring down the emperor, even stepping on him. This is definitely a great opportunity. He is not aware of the capabilities of the Qing family, but His Majesty's ability to arrange things like this before the incident absolutely trusts the Qing family. Nowadays, it is not an exaggeration for Da Qing to talk about internal and external troubles. His Majesty has already passed the weak crown, but has yet to take power. If it were not for this hasty imperial decree, he would probably have been sitting in this position. Empress, please have pity on Your Majesty. Since childhood, your mother has not taught and your father has not raised you. After becoming this emperor, it has become meaningless. Your Majesty's heart is bitter. If it weren't for you saving Your Majesty on that day, I'm afraid Your Majesty would have been reincarnated long ago. After so many years of not being a ruler or a subject, Your Majesty would have swallowed all his grievances. Now that you finally have the help of your virtuous wife, Empress, please have mercy on him. The ultimate move has been made, which is also Your Majesty's explanation. Once you find that the Empress does not agree, you will cry and tell him that His Majesty is a little pitiful. Of course, this is His Majesty's true words, but it is not something he can say. Falling Dew and a few people looked at Yu Gonggong strangely. Is this the so-called called those who are close to ink are black? And upon seeing this situation, the blurry image of the emperor in Qing Yan's heart suddenly became clear, and then his entire face turned black. The infuriating moments in my memory also became clear at this moment. She gritted her teeth and looked at the person in front of her. Grandpa Yu trembled, and the expression on his face didn't seem sympathetic, but rather a feeling of wanting to harm his master. Is it an illusion? Qing Yan took a deep breath and forcefully suppressed the urge to beat someone up. He said to Grandpa Yu, "Get up. Since that's the case, I'll go with you to the front court and have a walk." Seeing the goal achieved, Yu Hai didn't think much. He quickly got up, flattered and bowed, then leaned forward to support Qing Yan's arm. "Madam, please stand up carefully. The sedan chair is parked at the door, and I guarantee that these people will lift it quickly and steadily." That positive look almost made Qing Yan laugh in anger. Oh, it was indeed the person who was trained by that person. Wait outside the door. Grandpa Yu quickly lowered his head and retreated. After all, his goal was achieved, so it was as if he had gone early or late. Wait, you guys should also step down first. Chulu and others were taken aback for a moment, but didn't ask much and retreated in an orderly manner. When there was only Qing Yan left in the room, her fingers supported the phoenix bracelet on her wrist. "What kind of person are you? Just now, after her fingertips were inexplicably punctured, there was a constant scream inside the bracelet. Let me go, sigh. You heard me. I can say you heard me. Hurry up and let the little old man go. You're so impolite, you don't respond when you hear the little old man scream, your throat hurts. After hesitating for a moment, Qing Yan agreed. Listening to the old man's voice, age is definitely not young. As for what harms her, it's not her confidence. No one in this world can truly harm her. How do I release you? Isn't this your thing? Just put it out as you please. The old man was extremely depressed. His own things don't work, no wonder he stayed inside for nearly 1,000 years without even adding a blade of grass. Her things. The key is that this is not hers. Who knows how this old man got in? Did he use spiritual power? Qing Yan cautiously released a spiritual force into her, and immediately felt a connection between her soul and the bracelet, while also sensing that the little old man inside was jumping. Is this space? Is there a space in the Phoenix bracelet? The Qing Emperor has changed for several generations, and the Phoenix bracelet has been passed down to countless empresses, but no one has noticed the abnormality of this bracelet. It's very strange. Go in. She silently recited in her heart, and then disappeared into the room. End of this chapter. Chapter 6. Xumi. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 6 Xumi, is this the space inside the Phoenix bracelet? The green banquet appeared in the space, surrounded by nothing but the land below and the spring beside it, while the old man floated not far away. Girl, are you Empress Yuner? Although the little old man has been inside the Phoenix bracelet all along, he knows a lot about Qing. It's all thanks to the little emperor's broken mouth. He usually holds it, which is called a high cold. He can't grow old at a young age, but when he's alone, he keeps talking and saying everything, from the Empress Dowager who goes to the temple to the little beggar on the roadside. Whatever he knows, he will say. A few days ago, I heard that kid excitedly saying he was going to marry the queen. The little old man was also happy. It's good to get married, and once he gets married, he will be in charge. When he gets busy, he doesn't have time to flatter him. The Phoenix bracelet was sent to the side of the little queen, and he could only see but not speak. Until this morning, when the fog that had previously confined him had slightly receded, and the emptiness above his head also became thin, he tried to impact the weak spot. Who knows, it looks thin, but it can't break through. The little old man was extremely depressed. The freedom he had obtained was separated by a barrier, and he missed him so much that he ended up trapped in the barrier. Just as he was giving up, he saw a drop of blood break through the barrier and fall into the space. He opened his eyes wide and watched as the blood was broken down by nothingness, then merged into one. Then, nothingness gradually disappeared, and the space suddenly lit up. Then came the land and spring, with spring water gushing out to nourish the land, causing the mist to recede by a foot. The change happened right in front of the old man and was completed in an instant. The old man was overjoyed, as the changes in space indicated that it was evolving, and that drop of blood was the trigger, representing that the Phoenix bracelet had a master. Good thing, great thing. He was shouting and jumping in the space, but it was like calling someone in. As soon as the Qing Yan entered the space, the rules flooded into her mind. This is the Xumi space, which was created by the first emperor of Qing for his wife a long time ago. In that era, he was full of spiritual energy and had extremely high cultivation. He was proficient in refining weapons, and when he met someone he cherished, he made a Phoenix bracelet for it, which was embedded with the unexpectedly obtained Xumi space. Unfortunately, before he could reveal the secrets of the space, he discovered that the Empress and the Prime Minister were conspiring. In anger, he killed the Empress and the Prime Minister, and the Phoenix bracelet was also sealed by him in a private treasury. He intended to destroy it, but thought that the Xumi space was not easy to obtain, so he chose to seal it in the dark cell of the private treasury. After his son ascended the throne, he accidentally discovered this bracelet, which was exquisitely designed and highly skilled. He rewarded it to the empress at that time. After receiving it, the empress declared it to be a phoenix bracelet to show her status, and the emperor also accepted this statement. Today, the phoenix bracelet has become the most prestigious symbol in this harem. All objects in space belong to the bound one, and the body, death, and soul must be dispersed. That is to say, there is only one bound person in this space, and once this person dies, the Xumi space will also dissipate. Not to mention strangeness, it can only be said to be eerie. She had never seen any space bound only to its master once, and the space obtained in the trial land could be plundered. It seems that the origin of this space is not as she received it. Qing Yan felt a bit strange. The emperor, who had obtained the Xumi, did not inform anyone and did not even know the successor of his descendants. The emperor gave her a phoenix bracelet, which was an advantage for an outsider. However, the Empress Dowager is still here. Why would the phoenix bracelet be handed over to her by the emperor? This puzzled Qing Yan. As for the issue of recognizing the Lord, she didn't believe that over the years, every person who came into contact with the phoenix bracelet had not dropped blood on it, while others had not recognized the Lord, perhaps due to bloodline reasons. In fact, the first emperor had never entered the space of Sumeru to inspect, otherwise he wouldn't have been unable to discover this spring. The most important thing in the space is this spring, which is taken from the water of the Yaoqi lake. It is inexhaustible and can give birth to white bones and live. Every 3 days, there is a small burst of spiritual energy, and every 10 days, there is a big burst. What is most lacking in this continent? Spiritual energy. Due to the lack of spiritual energy, the 4 seasons are impermanent and there is no rain or drought. Similarly, due to the lack of spiritual energy, the original inhabitants of the Dragon Continent are unable to enter the high realm of spiritual cultivation. Qing Yan never thought of swallowing it alone. The burst of spiritual energy may be useful to the cultivator, but it is not very useful to her. In fact, returning it to this Dragon Continent would benefit her even more. The techniques practiced by the Qing family are different from those of others. They focus more on the cultivation of their mental state, which naturally enhances their strength. After being tested in a place of trial, their mental state has already surpassed their strength. Although they maintain the peak strength of the spiritual master, it is because there are no other spiritual masters or above in the mainland except for the saint in the prayer for rain hall. The level requirements for spiritual cultivation are extremely strict, divided into 5 levels of strength. Lingshi, Lingzuan, Lingxian, Lingxing, and Lingshen. Each level has 10 levels of realm, with 5 levels as the boundary. 5 levels and above are small realms, followed by large realms. 1,000 years ago, it was not an exaggeration to say that spiritual immortals could walk all over the land on the continent of Yulong. However, after the spiritual energy was cut off, with the passing of spiritual cultivators above the level of spiritual immortals, the highest strength value decreased again and again. Until now, there are very few spiritual cultivators, and their strength can only reach the 5th level of spiritual cultivators, which cannot be achieved further. The overall power of Yulong continent is low, and it is cultivated and harvested in primitive ways. No traces of other outsiders have been found this time. Just the Qiyu temple makes people dare not resist. Once the forces behind the Qiyu temple appear here, should they be worshipped as gods? Not to mention the secret confrontation between the royal family and the prayer for rain hall nowadays, the biggest threat is the blind worship of it by the people alone. Whether outsiders are outsiders or not, there are 81 prayer for rain halls on the mainland, all built on the spiritual spring of the Dragon Continent, cutting off the source of spiritual energy, implementing spiritual control, and only intercepting the original spiritual scholars. In addition, the Yulong continent will only become a subsidiary of the prayer for rain palace, and the survival of over 1 million people not only depends on the breath of others, but also on the belonging of others. Who would like to see such a situation in the entire continent of Yulong? The thought of this strengthened Qing Yan's determination to suppress her. One of the reasons for the Qing family's previous seclusion was due to the disappearance of the main family. The young master was young, and when she grew up, she was secretly plotted to disappear for 3 years. And those old and obscure clans, as recorded in the literature of the Qing family, are afraid of the small prayer for rainfall once the dragon continent rises. The old man looked at the contemplative banquet and felt at ease. He had been here for 1,000 years and was not in a hurry to know for a moment that she was exploring the secrets of space. His heart itched with excitement. Wow, he also wanted to know what the situation was in this place where he had lived for 1,000 years. Wei looked at her eagerly, wanting her to reveal the secret, but felt embarrassed to ask. After receiving the old man's gaze, Qing Yan thought he was in a hurry to leave, but his identity information was not disclosed. How could she trust him to be released? End of this chapter. Chapter 7. Trustworthy People. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 7. Trustworthy People. Girl, when do you think we'll go out? The old man looked at her pitifully, afraid that she would leave later and leave him behind. This old gentleman, I don't know who you are, and why are you trapped here? The phoenix bracelet's recognition of the owner is eerie, and the appearance of the old man is even more eerie. As soon as he spoke of this, the little old man was extremely aggrieved. He finally died, thinking that he would bid farewell to this world. However, his wife didn't know what was going on. She was afraid that if she let out a loud cry on him, he would be sucked into the phoenix bracelet, thinking that it was impossible for him to get out and have a reincarnation. The little old man can be considered as the great-great-grandfather of the little emperor. We don't know how many generations he has been separated. Anyway, when I was conscious, who did that? That bastard who always handled government affairs according to the empress's instructions had just been born. The little old man's life was hard, trapped in this broken bracelet, watching his unworthy descendants ruin his family business, and he couldn't even go out and beat him up. The old man was extremely heartbroken. He worked tirelessly to make the Qing stronger, but ended up encountering those few despicable people who not only kept themselves humble and became grandsons of the prayer for rainfall, but also neglected government affairs and entrusted national affairs to the empress, who remained steadfast in the 2 gates. If he could go out, he would definitely be given 10 or 100 big fights, and if he couldn't fight to death, he would have to be beaten to a pig's head. It's not that he looks down on women. The empress was raised in a deep chamber for more than a decade to learn 3 obediences and 4 virtues, and for the rest of her life, she was trapped in the palace fighting various battles. If it weren't for the protection of several loyal officials in Daqing, she would have died long ago. Qing Yan didn't feel aggrieved. According to the old man, he had been conscious for nearly 500 years, and when he was unconscious, it's not an exaggeration to say he was a character from 1,000 years ago. Emperor Zhao of Ming was called an unworthy descendant by him, and this old man may be the emperor's ancestor. I don't know the old gentleman's surname or who. Old man, my name is Sai. What's my name? Why can't the old man remember? What did Su say? The old man held his head and turned around several times, but still couldn't remember his name and taboo. Surname Su. That is undoubtedly the ancestor. Although this old man is only in a state of soul, his spiritual energy permeates throughout his body, and she cannot check his strength. He must be above her, that is, the character before the spiritual energy was cut off. At that time, it was an era of 100 schools of thought, and any one of them is now a top figure. Of course, there are also spiritual cultivators in the royal family, but the world rules are set out to explicitly suppress the royal cultivation and lifespan. No matter how high the cultivation is, at the age of dying, the dragon energy will suppress the cultivation, causing them to naturally die. This has been the case for all emperors. The holy ancestor exchanged merit for lifespan, but only obtained 10 years. This one, with the shining light of merit all over his body, shining in his eyes, is also a person of great ability. Unfortunately, he was born into the royal family. Now that her identity has been confirmed, she can go out. There is a time for the next spiritual power burst above the spring eye, and she should also go out and arrange for the follow-up. Waving his sleeves, he appeared in the hall with the old man. Opening the door, I saw Grandpa Yu spinning around like a headless fly, and the three maids beside her, watching her nose, and heart, were guarding the door. After hearing the sound, Yu Hai, who was originally farthest away, was the first to run to her. "Madam, you are ready. Can we set off now?" Yu Hai was anxious in his heart, but he didn't dare to urge. Qing Yan didn't embarrass him either. He glanced at the old man who had already drifted into the courtyard and nodded at Yu Hai. "Let's go." Yu Hai-dan was overjoyed and said, "Hurry up, hurry up. The sedan chair is ready, please take the sedan chair." After settling down at the Qing Yan banquet, he even gave 10,000 instructions outside. "Hold it steady, what's wrong with Empress? You're the only one in our family asking." "Madam, is the speed okay? Do you want it to be a little faster?" "Madam, are you still comfortable in the sedan chair? The servant has prepared urgently this time, and the cushions are all used by His Majesty." "Madam, please feel aggrieved. After the servant returns, you can immediately order them." Along the way, there were chattering sounds from the sea. Qing Yan brushed her eyebrows, feeling that Su Qi was testing her patience and putting such a broken-mouthed guy next to her, torturing her. Does the Empress find that servants talk too much? With a loud bang, Yu Hai slapped himself on the mouth. "I have disturbed the purity of the Empress, I should fight or not?" For a moment, the feeling that I knew I was wrong but didn't change was extremely strong. All right, you're a person next to the Emperor, I can't control this palace." Qing Yan sat upright, looking out through the swaying gauze curtain. The old man was following her sedan chair, drifting left and right, curious about everything. She didn't bother much either, he must be more familiar with this place than she is. Turning his gaze to the outside of the sedan chair, in the dense forest not far away, there was a mess. This was the closest road to the Chinha Hall and also the place where the Emperor had an accident last night. "Stop. Drop do and lift the veil. What's the problem with Empress?" Grandpa Yu's gaze followed, and his breath suddenly stopped. He was really confused, how could he forget that the danger His Majesty encountered here last night? I wanted to urge the Queen to leave, but I found that her gaze seemed to be looking toward somewhere in the forest. Did she find something? This place really went through a fierce battle, with lower trees being crushed and scattered with branches and fallen leaves. In some places, the soil color was dark, as if it were traces left by blood. The sword marks on the tree trunk are mottled and disorderly, but there are no traces of spiritual power left. However, is Su Yun so weak? Qing Yan doesn't believe it. This person can't even handle a few assassins, and she believes that the bloodstain was left by the other party. Only a few assassins can beat a person to the point where they can't find their shadow. When he was injured and picked up by her, Dr. Zhou said that he relied on spiritual power to protect his heart meridian in order to survive. A person who cultivates spirits and is skilled was stabbed by the assassin. At that time, his true life was hanging on the line, and he didn't care at all. Now, he was only injured but nowhere to be seen, and she couldn't help but think more. Is it that this person is playing tricks? Who calculated it? Who arranged the assassination again? This place is not far from her Chinha Hall, and there are constant guards patrolling around. How could there be a silent assassination? Suddenly, her gaze flickered. What is that? On a certain tree, she saw a particularly familiar sign and silently asked about the falling dew, only to see that she just shook her head. The matter is really becoming more and more interesting. Even the assassins he found are from his own family. It seems that in recent years, His Majesty has had a lot of contact with the people and things of the Qing family. In that situation, Steward Fong even married the outsider as the daughter of the Qing family to Su Qi, indicating that this person is now a trustworthy person. The scene before him is extremely intriguing. So, she cooperated with him. End of this chapter. Chapter 8. Prepare more. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 8. Prepare more, let's go. Now is not the time to say these things. Since we are not sure if it is a plan, let's wait a little longer. In the Hall of Supreme Harmony, the courtiers and envoys have already taken their seats. The grand scene of the Imperial and Empress wedding yesterday is still talked about by people. Prime Minister Zhou, sitting firmly in front of the courtiers, does not hear anything outside the window, and faces Mo Ziyuan from afar. The others, seeing that both adults were not looking well, dared not come forward and sat upright, waiting for His Majesty's arrival. Little did they know that the Queen was waiting. The Empress has arrived. The inner attendant outside the door shouted. Long live your Majesty. Sigh. No, it's the Empress who came and didn't hear from your Majesty. The shouting interrupted, and everyone knelt down, watching the long skirt sweep past their eyes before taking their seats by the dragon chair. Farewell to the Empress. After the two people in front spoke in unison, the others reacted and paid their respects one after another. Although I don't know the reason, following the two adults is definitely good. Get up. Yu Gonggang stood by the side of Qing Yan, knelt down and shouted. What kind of system is it? The crowd paused slightly as they stood up, then silently moved, causing the speaker to passively stand out. See, as long as they are low-key enough, there will be foolish people speaking for them. Without saying much, the blame will not fall on them, and the goal can still be achieved. Sure enough, the officialdom should be handed over to those who have a mouth. Mo Ziyuan's gaze casually swept over the envoys from other countries who looked at the play in front of him, regretting once again working with such a pedantic person. If he had known he had been compared to the historian, Mr. Tu, he would have had to wait until the envoy returned. Mr. Tu, who was forced to stand up, was now staring intently at the back of his colleagues ahead. If his gaze could kill someone, these people would definitely be riddled with wounds. It's these people, trick him. Qing Yan's gaze shifted to the adult in the middle, and Grandpa Yu quietly mentioned the name of the adult in her ear. Mr. Tu, a historian, was not lacking in loyalty to the Empress Dowager. Master Tu, what are you saying? Just glanced up at him, and then casually scanned the whole room. There were many people watching the play, including those foreign envoys. Qing Yan knew that as long as she stood here today, it would be necessary for her to do so. But the timing was not right today, and the next morning court, if your Majesty had not returned yet, it would be a big battle waiting for her. Lord Tu arched his hand and stood, his head slightly drooping. With just one glance, his back was sweating. Is this Empress really the one rumored to be? I speak wildly, and I hope the Empress can forgive me. If there is no objection, then let's have the banquet. Qing Yan lightly tapped his chin as the dancer entered, the atmosphere in the venue began to liven up. Although they were hesitant about the one above, the banquet was a good one, and they kept saying good things. At least in front of outsiders, there should be no conflict. The emperor never showed his face throughout the entire process, and although the envoy was surprised, he didn't think much when he saw the officials in Daqing looking accustomed to it. The banquet did not last long, with two prime ministers present. She just showed her face and settled the matter. Quickly left the banquet and returned to the Chinha Hall. After retreating from the palace, the three members of the Falling Dew came forward to report. Having not served as a director for 3 years, there are now a lot of things waiting for her, because outsiders are in Yongcheng. Although they won't help her, Butler Fong still made the decision to place the contact point inside Yongcheng, and then Luoying, who stayed in the food workshop, handed it to the 3 people in the palace. The 3 of them reported on the past 3 years in an orderly manner, ranging from national politics to daily necessities. This was a habit of the Qing banquet, and whenever she went to a strange place, she preferred to understand the local situation from the bottom. Master, your Majesty did indeed make a deal with the Dark Pavilion. I only received the news last night when your Majesty went missing, but it was just a scene for some people to see. In the end, I unexpectedly disappeared and will investigate. Fallen Dew is extremely sensitive to news and also responsible for connecting with the outside world in the Dark Pavilion. Initially, the role of the Dark Pavilion was only to protect the Master, but in recent years, the disappearance of the Master has made them aware of the harm of delayed information. On the surface, there are people from the Jushian Pavilion inquiring about mainland news, while the Dark Pavilion is responsible for those hidden forces. The disappearance of the Master once is already a major mistake. If it were to happen again, these people would all commit suicide by cutting their necks. As a result, in recent years, the Dark Pavilion has overdeveloped and become the #1 killer organization in the Dragon Continent. This news surprised Qing Yan a lot, and it coincided with her original idea. She had formed the Dark Pavilion for the sake of those forces in the darkness, but now she has easily obtained it. Well done. Simple 4 words, but they make Chulu ecstatic. Now that the banquet has ended, according to tradition, your Majesty's wedding will have a 3-day absence from court. With just 3 days of searching, she may be able to unload the burden. Have our people traced Su Qi? According to the intelligence sent by his subordinates, it was indeed a performance at the time, but later another wave of people came and relentlessly pursued them. His Majesty changed his plan at the time and was abducted. Qing Yan felt his teeth itch and wanted to curse. Isn't this guy afraid of a car accident? What puzzled her even more was that she dared to go missing without arranging anything afterwards. Or is there any arrangement she doesn't know about? May. In the blink of an eye, a woman in black and strong attire appeared before her, kneeling on one knee with a sword in front of her. Did you find any suspicious individuals? Asking people in the dark, May is definitely the best candidate. She is her dark guard, and everything around her cannot escape May's eyes, so asking her is right. Yes, my subordinates are here, they dare not approach. Bring it over. Later, May brought a man over, dressed in black and a mask like her, and unable to see her appearance clearly. My subordinate, please see Empress. Who are you? The man clenched his fists and said, I am the Dark Dragon Guard. I have received your Majesty's order to secretly protect the Empress. Sure enough. Have your people followed your Majesty? After hesitating for a few moments, the man nodded. Ha! Where is your Majesty? I knew it was like this. Your Majesty's whereabouts, I apologize for not being able to inform you, but your Majesty has a secret decree that all matters in the palace should be fully handled by the Empress Dowager, and decisions on important matters in the court should also be made by the Empress Dowager. Without even waiting for any reaction from the Qing Yan, he clenched his fists, said his subordinates to step back, and ran away. At the same time, in a small courtyard within Yongcheng, a man in brocade stood in the courtyard. Master, Madam has already met the dragon leader. The man waved his hand and retreated. Inside, a person walked out holding a cup, and it was none other than Duke Yu who was supposed to be in the palace. Your Majesty, take a sip of tea to moisten your mouth. Suyun took the cup, took a sip, and then put it down. I'm afraid you're going to curse me to death. Who is it that the master and servant know each other well? Do you want me to go find a divine doctor and prescribe some blood-activating and stasis-removing medicine? Duke Yu felt that His Majesty's beating was inevitable, and it was just a face-to-face encounter. He knew that this empress was definitely not easy to provoke. Suyun secretly suppressed the idea of wanting to escape. Why not hide for a few more days? No, it's not possible to finally marry someone back. If you offend someone and run away, it won't be worth the loss. Prepare more. I'm afraid he might get beaten up, but when he thinks about it, he feels like his flesh hurts along with him. It's just a conditioned reflex. So violent, fortunately, he married him back home, otherwise he wouldn't know which good man to harm. End of this chapter. Chapter 9. Admissibility. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 9 Admissibility. Your Majesty, I don't know if I should say something. Suyun gave him a sidelong glance and said, "Are you drifting? If you know you shouldn't say it, don't ask." Grandpa Yu chuckled. "That's not possible. I'm holding back until I say it out loud." "Then say it. There's not so much nonsense." "That servant said it, when are you planning to return to the palace?" "I'm afraid you'll be late and killed by the Empress." As soon as he finished speaking, he was slapped on the head. What did the servant dog say? "I am the supreme leader of the 9 dragons, who dares to fight." Speaking these words, even the ants on the ground don't believe it. You're not afraid how you'll hear the news from the Dark Guard and be too scared to go back to the palace. Of course, Yu Hai only dares to say this in his heart. All right. If you have nothing to do, go back to the palace and stay there. Don't stand in front of me. Suyun waved his hand and drove the person away. After bowing down and bowing, Yu Hai retreated to the entrance position. Before stepping out of the threshold, he heard the sound behind him. "Come back." Yu Hai knew this expression and ran back to Su Yun's side with his head down. Protect the Empress in the palace. She has never seen the methods of the Deep Palace before. Please pay more attention to the people around her. If there is anything, let Long Yi pass the message. Yu Hai lowered his head. At this moment, the banquet was extremely busy. When she woke up in the morning, she didn't pay attention to dealing with the people left behind by outsiders. Just as she had just discussed the matter with her 4 subordinates, there was a commotion outside. She thought the leader would be the one named Yen Lu, but to her surprise, it wasn't. "Madam, I am not questioning my master. You are the master of the Qinhe Palace, but I am not at fault and have been demoted. I feel aggrieved in my heart." The speaker was the palace maid who came in with Yen Lu when she woke up in the morning. What was her name? Qing Yan really didn't know. After raising her hand to stop the falling dew, she looked at the palace maid. "Come forward and tell me your name in this palace. When did you enter the Qinhe Hall?" "My servant Shuang'er was transferred to the Qinhe Hall by Grandpa Yu yesterday and was on duty in front of His Majesty earlier. The Imperial Palace and the Imperial Palace are completely different. There, she is just a small palace maid, but when she arrives at the Qinhe Palace, she becomes a high-ranking palace maid. It's like returning to the ordinary world after being gilded, giving her a sense of superiority and a strange sense of superiority. She consciously recruited the palace maids who entered the Qinhe Palace together, protected them, and taught them how to survive in this deep palace. Because of this sense of superiority, she dared to speak up in front of her master. And Yen Lu is the person she wants to protect this time." Yen Lu, hiding behind Shuang'er, looked at Qing Yan with a timid gaze, and even smiled triumphantly as Qing Yan's gaze turned towards her. "It's quite outrageous. A servant gives his master a face, who gave him the courage. This Chen and every plant and tree in the palace belong to our palace. Do we still need your consent, Shuang'er, to deal with a small palace maid?" Upon hearing this, Shuang'er's face darkened. The several people above are all inexplicable. Is there something unusual about this palace maid? The words spoken were even more unexpected. "Empress Dowager, you only entered the palace yesterday. Perhaps you didn't know that when Empress Dowager Xian was in charge of official affairs, she always had clear rewards and punishments for the masters below. A situation like Yen Lu would not exist. As the head of the harem now, are you still unable to be like Empress Dowager Xian?" This made the palace maids present kneel down and silently apologize. Yen Lu quietly took a step forward and pulled on Shuang'er's sleeve, but she gave her a sideways glance with only one meaning in her eyes. Something unfulfilling. "Shuang'er, are you saying that this palace is not as good as Xianfei?" "I didn't say this, madam, you misunderstood. Ha! Qing Yan stood up and slowly walked to Shuang'er's side, with Chulu following behind her. In an instant, she clamped Shuang'er's arms behind her and kicked her at the bend of her leg, causing her to kneel on the ground. Dong! The sound of kneeling on both knees echoed in the hall. Without waiting for Liangxia to take action, Yan Lu knelt down voluntarily. Qing Yan glanced at her, knowing the current situation, but slowly stood behind her. Yan Lu, are you not satisfied with our palace's arrangements? Yan Lu bent down to the ground and said, I dare not. That delicate and weak strength, whenever there is a man present, I'm afraid it will be heartbreaking. But you're in a hurry, why? Because it's been a while since your master has passed and you haven't been allowed to leave the palace yet. Why? Do you think that our palace is just the master of the Qinhe palace and won't notice your little moves? Or do you think that our palace dare not move you when you lean against the prayer for rain palace? Yan Lu was shocked and pale. She thought she was being very secretive and had been under the queen's watchful eye all along. But if she admitted like this, it would have hurt the face of the praying rain hall. Once the Lord found out, she would definitely die. I don't know what the Empress is talking about. I have always been obedient in the Qinhe Hall and there is nothing inappropriate. Please be aware of it. Shuang'er, who was lying on the ground, seemed to have confidence at this moment. She lifted her head and looked fiercely at Qing Yan. Empress Dowager, after being a member of a country, are you not afraid of being laughed at by the world for such a lack of propriety? Bold. Chulu slapped Shuang'er's face, and her cheeks instantly swelled up. If you want evidence, this palace will let you understand. Reaching out to take what Liangxia handed over, a dozen small notes. On the 5th day of the 2nd lunar month, the emperor ordered someone to tidy up the Qinhe Hall. The things have been placed in place, please let me know. On the 1st day of March, someone arranged a decoration inside the Hai Lai Hall, but the servant did not use his phone and his belongings were taken out. On March 20th, the emperor arrived. On the night of the Empress Dowager's wedding on April 21st, the emperor disappeared. There are differences in the future, the plan is exposed, and we seek to return. The notes were in the hands of Qing Yan, as she let go, falling one by one around Yan Lu. Admitted. Yan Lu was as if she had been afflicted by a plague, with a face full of ashes. She couldn't remember the rest clearly, but the news she had received in the past 2 days was exactly the same. Especially today, even though she had watched the news go out, how could she have returned to the hands of the Empress? You lied to me. I'm going to kill you. But Shuang'er turned around and pressed Yan Lu under her body, pinching her neck and roaring. I was determined to seek justice for you, but you did that betrayal. You destroyed me, and I will kill you. Pull it apart. Fall forward and pull the two apart. Qing Yan bent down and lifted Yan Li's chin. TSK, you are truly loyal. For the sake of your master, dare to oppose his majesty. Don't worry, this time our palace will not kill you, and even fulfill your wish to send you out of the palace and to your master's side. And watch, how can our palace shatter your master to pieces? With a flick of his hand, he took the handkerchief handed by Liangxia and wiped his fingers clean one by one. Send it to the prayer for rain hall, and say it's a great gift that this palace rewards to all the members of the prayer for rain hall. There will be more gifts to be sealed one by one in the future. Mei flew down, picked up Yan Lu, and disappeared into the palace in a moment. Along with them were scattered notes on the ground. You can still hear Yan Li's roar from afar. Qing Yan, you must die hard. The master will definitely kill you. Qing Yan didn't care at all, even letting her roar go, just to make the entire harem hear her and tighten its tail, don't be caught by her. Let's break up. Everyone stood up and retreated trembling. The only one kneeling in the hall was the disbelieving frost on her face, constantly muttering, deceiving me, deceiving me. Give her to Yu Hai. The people in front of the emperor are handed over to the emperor for handling, and she still disdains exceeding her authority. End of this chapter. Chapter 10. How Poor It Is. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 10. How poor it is. As soon as Yu Hai returned to the palace, he saw the young eunuch beside him carrying a beaten person. Who is this? Which palace is it from? What has happened? The eunuch approached him and whispered, "This is Schwanger, who used to work in the Hall of Supreme Harmony." Yu Hai frowned. Those who leave the Hall of Supreme Harmony can still be bullied. Who dares to disturb people from other families? Yu Hai, a person who suffered from bullying at the end of his life, has gained power and will protect those around him. As long as he goes out of the Hall of Supreme Harmony, he will remind others not to swallow his grievances. Some people are not afraid. Therefore, the eunuchs under his command are all loyal to him. Upon hearing this, the eunuch truthfully reported what had just happened in the Qinhe Hall, without adding any embellishments or pleading for Schwanger's mercy. Even if the two came from the same place, he knew that the steward was someone who loved loyalty, honesty the most. In his view, this frost was completely self-inflicted, and even those who were deceived by others deserved to die. How audacious! How dare you leak your Majesty's information, drag it down and interrogate severely. I want to know where all the information has gone. Is Schwanger innocent? Completely innocent. Before today's incident was exposed, there were many leaks of your Majesty's trivial matters, ranging from eating to sewing, which were discovered openly. She was not on duty at the Hall of Supreme Harmony every day. What is the Hall of Supreme Harmony? It is His Majesty's sleeping quarters, and all things inside the palace are not allowed to be leaked. Yu Hai wished he could cut him with countless knives and cuts. His Majesty almost suffered from this before. He felt extremely guilty at the time and thoroughly investigated. He caught the traitor, replaced him with a new person, and retrained him. And this Schwanger was one of those who came in, with countless defenses and almost fell into danger. Thank you to the Empress for this matter. Without worrying about tidying up, he hurriedly ran to the Qinhe Hall, feeling both guilty and grateful. He looked at Qing Yan with a headache and finally sent him away. This is for my father. Law, but I am wholeheartedly dedicated to your Majesty. As soon as Chulu's words were spoken, they resonated with the other two. The person who has been with the Emperor for the longest time, if it weren't for the Emperor's heart, I'm afraid it would be difficult to survive in this deep palace. How pitiful was the Emperor when he was a child. Just like crying in the sea before, he is a person who has gone through many hardships and finally survived to the present day. The descendants of the late Emperor were quite abundant. Before the Emperor was born, there were already 10 adult princes. When those princes gathered their forces everywhere to resist each other, the Emperor was just a small embryo. The princes of the previous dynasty fought incessantly, and the harem did not cease. The current Empress Dowager, the then consort Zhou, was the restless one. From the day she became pregnant, she knew that the one in her belly was a bargaining chip for her future favor. At this time, the late Emperor was already old, and those who were dressed in fancy clothes were not necessarily favored. Nowadays, she is the only one in the palace who is pregnant. If she gives birth to a son, she will be the current emperor's youngest son and cannot be spared. If she gives birth to a daughter, she will be the emperor's youngest daughter. His Majesty loves her daughter no less than her son. So, when the little emperor was still in the belly of Empress Zhou, he was used cleanly. After birth, there was also persecution from women vying for favor. They fell ill and cried every few days. Originally, as a young son, the late emperor had a preference for favor, but Empress Zhou died, making the young emperor weaker than others. At first, due to the child's poor health, the late emperor would visit and reward him multiple times, but after countless times, no amount of patience was worn away. The late emperor ultimately gave up his love for his young son due to his headache over the princes who were vying for power and power. How could Empress Zhou tolerate it? But she dared not complain to the late emperor, but abused her own child. The little emperor had never received the favor of his mother since he was born, and stumbled to the age of entering school. She was even stared at by Zhou Fei like a devil, and wherever there was a little bit of something she couldn't do well, she would inevitably be beaten. It was also fortunate for the mother and son. Before the late emperor left, the adult prince fought to the death and became useless, and unexpectedly obtained the throne in vain. The ambition of Empress Zhou also went from becoming the most prestigious empress to becoming the most powerful woman in Qing. She used the excuse that the little emperor was young to listen to politics from behind the curtain, and even if the ministers had objections, they gave up because of this precedent. With the assistance of the prime minister last week, he quickly regained power, and the Empress Dowager's party in the court won a complete victory over the pro-emperor faction. Even as the emperor grew older and became qualified to take over, he still did not delegate power. Prime Minister Zhou was the elder brother of the Empress Dowager, who was devoted to the cause of Qing. In earlier years, he indulged the Empress Dowager, but it was actually a helpless move. The Empress Dowager's position in the harem was vacant, and coupled with the young age of the emperor, he could only allow the Empress Dowager to govern. As the Empress Dowager's ambition grew and she even resorted to violence against the emperor, she joined forces with her courtiers to force the Empress Dowager to retreat to a royal temple for a period of 3 years, known as praying for blessings for the late emperor. Taking advantage of this opportunity, the emperor and Zhou Mo, the two prime ministers, restrained their power and withdrew 3 of the 6 ministries. However, the most important Ministry of Personnel and Ministry of Rights remained in the hands of the Empress Dowager's party, which was also a helpless move. Firstly, although they were part of the Empress Dowager's party, they sincerely worked for the court and could not move. How did the Empress Dowager treat the emperor? As the emperor grew older, the Empress Dowager's killing intent towards him grew stronger. She knew too well which was advantageous between an adult and strong emperor and an emperor who was bedridden and incurable for a long time. So, 3 years ago on the Mid-Autumn Festival night, while the emperor was sneaking out to play, he arranged for an assassination along the way. He was ruthless, avoiding the key points with his moves and timely treatment, and could survive for several years. He was kind, but he broke his tendons one after another. When I escaped to Qingmang Mountain, I only breathed a sigh. At that time, my body was pierced into a sieve, and every night for a moment or two, my life was gone. The Qing family brought out a large number of rare treasures to treat him, which not only saved his life but also increased his cultivation. It is unknown what will happen after he returns to the palace. Because a few days after he recovered and left, she fell for a plot to leave. In my memory, the outsider showed no concern for the royal family. Most of the time, he was either exploring the secrets of the Qing family or making trouble, especially after arriving in Yongcheng. He caused trouble every day and his mind was full of rascals. However, this time the emperor went missing. Qing Yan didn't believe he was really caught in the trap, and even suspected that he was trying to escape the wedding night. After all, she felt that such a woman herself, let alone the emperor. Empress Dowager, ladies from all palaces come to pay their respects. The sound coming from outside the door made Qing Yan take a deep breath. Can't we get through this today? From opening her eyes until now, she hasn't had a moment to rest. According to the etiquette system, when the emperor and empress get married, the imperial concubines can pay their respects at the Empress Dowager's banquet. Now that the Empress Dowager is not here, it is reasonable to visit her palace. If the Empress doesn't want to see you, I'll send those people away. Chulu's eyes were filled with heartache. As soon as the master returned, he had dealt with a lot of troublesome matters and now had to go see the Emperor's consort. It's okay, Qing Yan waved his hand, I'll see you sooner or later. End of this chapter.